The day I was discharged, the day I was finally coming home from the hospital, was cool and bright, one of those late spring mornings when the sun slips lightly behind high, fast-moving clouds, and you can smell fresh-cut grass in the air. My body was tired and unsteady from the mild stroke I'd suffered a couple of weeks before, but my mind was awake with bittersweet anticipation. I hadn't seen my son in some time, not since before my illness, and no matter what had passed between us in the last few years, I couldn't keep hope from swelling in my heart. Maybe, just maybe, nearly losing me would waken him the gentle concern he used to have as a child when he'd fall asleep clinging to my hand, his fevered brow clammy, wish was turned to the partner air in hand, and I'd sing him lullabies until both our fears faded into the stillness of the night. When Daniel pulled up in a shiny black BMW, his business car, all sleek lines and freshly waxed, I was waiting under the awning in front of the hospital, my few belongings in a nondescript canvas bag at my feet. He stepped out, suit impeccable, hair neatly trimmed, jaw clenched in that way he's picked up since moving to the city. There was no smile, no embrace, not even a pat on the hand. Just a brief nod, a quick look, and then, as he glanced at his watch, Daniel said, "You good to walk, Mom? Let's move, I've only got a few minutes." I tried to smile, but my lips caught on the ache I felt in my chest. I let the nurse help me into the passenger seat. We drove in silence for a while. Soft, classical music barely audible over the steady hum of the road. Finally, he spoke. "There's no room for you at our place, just so you know. Just that." So matter of fact, like canceling a lunch plan or mentioning bad weather. And right then, in the soft hush between us filled with the sound of my uneven breathing and the rush of traffic, I understood. I was no longer needed, no longer wanted. Whatever role I had played in this family, I'd been recast as an extra, a piece of baggage to be put in storage, out of the way. He drove me to the old one-bedroom rental I'd been calling home since last fall, helped me out of the car, and watched me climb the few narrow steps to my door. He didn't even come inside. When I turned to thank him, he was already striding back down the walk, car keys in hand. It was the plainness of his words, the ease with which he said them, that truly broke me, a final sign, clear as daylight, of what I meant to him now. A few days later, my life took a sharp, strange turn. Early one morning, as I stood in my tiny front yard trimming the overgrown hedges, I saw a black Rolls-Royce glide silently to the curb outside my apartment. It was the kind of car you only see in the movies or behind the gates of houses. You pass and wonder about. I shut off the old clippers and waited, heart racing. I knew who it was. Without a word, I gathered my things and stepped toward the waiting car. From the front window, Daniel's wife, Allison, caught sight of me, and I saw, in the way she clutched the curtain and slumped to the floor, that she understood exactly what was happening. I didn't look back. I just smiled quietly, my own private answer to the tangled heartache that life and family sometimes wraps us in. Love, I realized, is something you give, but you're not required to give it endlessly, least of all to those who trample it beneath their feet. My name is Margaret Taylor. I am 72 years old, a widow, and for most of my life, I was the neighborhood tailor. Nearly 40 years I spent at my sewing machine, the steady whir of its motor and the gentle sway of fabric beneath my hands, shaping the rhythm of my days. Now, the shakes in my fingers keep me from threading a needle, and the only thing that fills my silence is the sound of my own name, spoken by no one at all. There was a time, not long ago, when each day brimmed with purpose. I'd rise before dawn, pull on thick socks, and ride the city bus to the wholesale mart buying bolts of fabric, spools of thread, bags of buttons, always searching for the best deals. In the afternoons, I'd stitch uniforms for the local schools, hem prom dresses, mend the battered overalls of hard-working dads who always tipped a little, something extra for the kids. Back then, my world was small and busy, but it was enough. Filled with Saturday block parties and church picnics, with neighbors knocking late to ask if I could let down a pair of pants or hand-stitch a patch onto a beloved child's bear. Through all of this, my only child, Daniel, was my guiding light, Born frail and often sick, he spent half his childhood in and out of doctors' offices. More nights than I could count, I'd pressed cold compresses to his forehead, spooned chicken soup into his mouth, soothed his crying with gentle back rubs long after midnight. After my husband passed away, everything sharpened, every burden and decision, every failure and hope fell on my shoulders alone. Money was always tight. More than once, I came close to closing the shop rent past due, bills stacked high. But I'd look at Daniel's sleeping face, the way his lashes fluttered in the half-light, and my resolve would stiffen. Whatever happened, I was determined. My son will have a brighter future than I did. What I failed to imagine, even as I worked and worried and loved, was the way I might be treated once that future arrived. Closing the tailor shop 5 years ago was the hardest decision I ever made. Business had slowed, and my hands couldn't keep up the pace. But the last push came on a summer afternoon with a single phone call. "Mom, I messed up, lost a lot. It was this investment deal, and now I owe more than I can pay back. Please, please, I need help." Without thinking, I agreed. "Don't worry, sweetheart. If I sell the shop, I can get you the money." At that moment, the shop was my life, every roll of fabric wrapped in memory, every order slip a badge of trust. The sign with my name, carved by my late husband, hung above the door like a family crest. Still, I convinced myself, that's what parents are for. It's only natural. After the dust settled, though, an itching discomfort crept in. I'd overhear Allison, my daughter-in-law, in the kitchen. When she didn't know I was listening, "Is there anything your mom can do besides help with money?" That's all she's good for. It stung, a needle straight to the heart. And so I faded into the background of their lives, doing my best to take up as little space as possible. I shopped early, came and went quietly, folded laundry soft as a whisper. I thought, maybe it'd be better if they barely noticed I was there at all. Now I rent a one-room in an old wooden apartment block in the outer edges of upstate New York. Less than 200 square feet, just space enough for a small hot plate, a battered refrigerator, and, across every inch of the back wall, a mosaic of pictures of Daniel. There's his baby photo, all pink cheeks and wide eyes. One from his 8th birthday, grinning in a firefighter costume, his high school graduation, leaning tall beside me in a suit 2 sizes too big. A handful of sport snapshots, some from college. They're my treasures, more precious than any jewelry or silverware I might have once owned. I've missed a few rent payments. More than once I skipped the doctor, shivered through a winter cold, stretched instant oatmeal for days. But I could never part with those photographs, not for any amount of money. Most nights, I talk to those pictures. "Daniel, are you happy? You know, honey, I would have given you anything." I still would. That hasn't changed. Some days, I know my words won't ever reach him. My place in his world is gone now. And yet, a mother's heart is a strange thing. Even when forgotten, even when set aside. Deep down, all I want is for my child to be happy and safe, even if it means letting myself vanish into the background. But not a day goes by that I don't wonder what it's all been for. I am Margaret Taylor. I have stitched my hopes and love into every sweater and dress, every neat seam, for 72 years. Now, there's a hole in my chest where memories of being cherished should live. I wonder what it is I've truly left behind. How do I still exist in Daniel's future? Does any of what I did matter to anyone at all? It would be enough, just once, to hear "thank you" from a loved one. Maybe then, my heart would find rest. But sometimes, even that wish feels too grand. Every morning now, I pour sweet tea into a small mug and set it by my late husband's photo. "John," I whisper, "did I do a good job? Did I make the right choices?" Only silence answers. Still, I cannot regret the way I loved, even if my love never found its way through. I will never stop being a mother. Even if, perhaps, I was always a little too tender-hearted to ever live truly alone. I remember that May morning as if it were yesterday. It was Wednesday, May 8th, 2024, the day I was finally cleared to leave the hospital. The doctor told me I should be fine as long as I didn't push myself. My legs were wobbly, but I was hopeful. I couldn't help but hope, hoping I'd see some spark of care in Daniel's face when he came to pick me up, maybe because I'd been close to dying, maybe just because he was my son. Just to hear his voice, I told myself, would be enough. He arrived in that black car, in his dark suit, not a trace of emotion on his face. "Hey, Mom, looks like you're holding up all right." I smiled, more out of habit than anything. I wanted to say, "I'm fine, especially now that you're here." But before I could speak, Daniel cut me off, eyes already drifting to his watch. "I'm short on time today. I'll drop you at your place so I can get back to the city. Let's go." Without a word, I got in. The soft music played, filling the silence that stretched so long and cold between us. All the while, I held on to that small piece of hope, even as it slipped quietly from my hands. After what felt like forever riding in that silent car, we finally drifted down a street that made my heart stumble. I spotted familiar, tree-lined avenues, the kind you only see in long-settled neighborhoods, old maples out front, porch flags waving in a gentle northern breeze. When I turned my head, there it was, our old two-story house. The same pale yellow siding, the rosary bushes clinging to the picket fence, and the window boxes still in need of paint. It was the house where John and I had raised Daniel, where I'd put on pot after pot of chicken soup, and where the floorboards remembered 1,000 nights of our family's laughter and tears. But Daniel didn't stop. He just kept driving, passing right by the old house. My mouth opened, a question caught on my tongue, but then he swung the car down a narrow lane behind the property. It was a back alley most folks used only to take out the trash, the kind of spot where grass grew patchy and kids chased after stray baseballs. "Aren't we?" I started, but the car was already coming to a halt. We sat just outside a small, battered tin shed with a drooping roof and saggy wooden door. I recognized it immediately. It had been a tool shed, half storage, half forgotten. Since the days Daniel was little, its roof eaten through with rust, the door frame warped, weeds snaking over the cracked foundation. It smelled of loneliness and disuse. I looked at Daniel, feeling panic fluttering up my throat. "What? What is this?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. For an instant, he tried to manage a smile, a stiff mask held in place. Then he fiddled with his keys. "Mom, listen, things are a little tight in the house right now. Allison's due soon? Any day now, actually. And the nursery's all set up. We just can't spare the extra room. This is only temporary, I promise. I need you to stay here for a little while. Just until things settle." His words scattered in the stale air. I sat there, mouth dry, unable to string together a single answer. As I tried to steady myself, gripping the door for balance, the sound of footsteps approached. Allison, my daughter-in-law, appeared outside. She didn't say hello. Her eyes slid past me, expression unreadable, and she pressed a small envelope into my hand. "This is for your living expenses, about $500. Also, I need you to stay inside as much as you can. If the neighbors see you, it could get complicated." Her voice was ice on glass. It cut sharper than any needle prick, colder than the IV drip I'd endured in the hospital. I nodded numbly. I had no words at all, just a strange, rising emptiness. Inside the shed, the air smelled stale and faintly of mildew. There was a single moth-eaten blanket spread out on a battered twin mattress, a scarred-up end table wedged beside it, and a curtain thumbtacked over the window pane, cracked and flecked with grime. No kitchen, of course. No bathroom. The outdoor toilet was shared with the alley house, the nearest bathhouse blocks away. I ran my fingers along the walls, half expecting them to dissolve beneath my touch. Daniel lingered in the doorway, apologetic but distant. "Please, Mom, I just need you to put up with this for a bit. I swear I'll figure something out after the baby is born." What could I say? I gave a little nod, the only answer I could muster. They brought in my single suitcase. Then, as if nothing unusual had happened, Daniel and Allison turned and slipped back into the house, leaving the shed door hanging open. I watched them through the curtain, watched my own family recede from view. In that moment, something in my chest gave way, breaking with a sound only I could hear. Night fell. The temperature dropped and I curled inside the quilt, shivering. I reached for my suitcase and opened it under the pallid light of the single naked bulb. There wasn't much. 2 changes of clothing, a few bottles of prescription medicine, and a slim sheaf of documents held together in a weathered manila folder. Inside were contracts and forms I kept through the years-old life insurance, policies, social security statements, even the prepaid mortgage paperwork John and I had pored over late at night. I traced my fingers across them, searching for some hint of reassurance. That's when my eyes landed on a sheet I'd never seen. In careful block letters it read, "Application for transfer of property title." There, in black ink, was a date I didn't recognize. A signature that, though neat, felt foreign under my gaze. Beside it, the round impression of my notary stamp, my official mark, the one I'd kept hidden at the back of my jewelry drawer ever since John had passed. My heart seized. I hadn't filled this out. I hadn't signed it. But there was my name, and there, unmistakably, was my stamp. Yet I knew Daniel had access to it in recent years. Just for convenience, he'd said. Had they really filed this paperwork without my knowing? My hands began to tremble, and I fought to breathe. Desperate, I flicked open my last bank statement. My heart dropped. The balance was bare, less than $30 left, and on the transaction list appeared withdrawals and deposits I'd never made. Title transfer fee, $3,200. Real estate agency commission, $1,800. Name change and deed processing, $450. Each entry told a story I wasn't part of. My house, my home, my only nest egg gone, transacted like a piece of scrap furniture. It felt like someone had quietly erased the pencil lines of my whole life while I dozed on a hospital bed. My house, without even asking me. But the tears wouldn't come. I just shut my eyes, let out a shaky breath, tried not to let despair choke out all the air in the tiny room. So this was how the story would go. I'd given up everything for those I loved, and in the end, I had been signed away myself, not just from my house, but from my place in my only child's world. Outside, the night was alive with the new baby's wails, Daniel's voice, the flutter of television laughter drifting from windows I used to own. All of it felt distant, cut off. Every sound on that old street belonged to someone else now, not me. I never dreamed being a mother could become so empty, that the love and sacrifice I poured into my only son could end with me shut. Away in the dark, so close to home but banished from it. From the suitcase, I removed a faded photograph. Daniel, age 5, the summer I found him a tiny plaid shirt for the first day of kindergarten. He's holding a goldfish won at the Firehouse Fair, eyes lit up with hope, his contagious little smile softer than the habit he'd later grow into. I could see no trace of that little boy in the man who'd driven me here. How did it come to this? I whispered. Clutching that memory to my chest, I lay back and let my eyes close. All night, the laughter and television from the main house drifted toward my thin-walled shelter. I lay in the dark, tears hot on my face, unable to keep them back, silent as rain on stone. But in that flood of loneliness, I felt a seed take root. A new impulse, delicate and stubborn. My name, my life, my very existence. No one could erase them while I still drew breath. No matter how much anyone wanted to, I would find a way to reclaim myself. This wasn't vengeance, not really. It was simply survival. It was the only way to keep from being lost entirely. I checked my old watch. 3 in the morning. I knew sleep wouldn't come. I pulled the blanket tighter and placed my old hot water bottle. The same one John filled for me in winters past, across my knees. Then I reached for my worn black address book. There, between pages yellowed from time, was a single phone number I'd thumbed and then shut away dozens of times. It belonged to someone I hadn't called since before John died, a lawyer by the name of Stephen Frank. Years ago, back before he'd gotten his license, John had helped save his life, covering Stephen's medical bills after a car accident nearly killed him. John always said, "If you're ever in a spot, Margaret, Stephen's the man to call. He owes us more than he can ever repay." Now, 30 years later, I pressed those numbers out of trembling habit, letting the call ring out. My chest was tight with hope and dread. Re-eing. Re-eing. After the third ring, a groggy voice answered. Hello? Yeah. Who is this? I'm so sorry to bother you at this hour. This is Margaret Taylor. I think you once knew my late husband, John. For a moment, only silence. Then there was the audible gasp of recognition. Mrs. Taylor, you must be John's wife. Oh my God, of course. Of course I remember. I remember everything. Yes, John passed away 10 years ago. I never got to thank you for all your help back then. No, ma'am. If it wasn't for your husband, I wouldn't be here. He saved my life. No matter how many years pass, I haven't forgotten. His voice was thick with emotion, and I felt a wave of relief so deep, I almost sank. I bowed my head, gripping the phone tight. Stephen, I'm at the end of my rope. I need help. I never thought I'd ask, but now? I told him everything. About Daniel, the missing money, the forged signature, the title transfer I never agreed to, the shed, all of it in a whisper just above tears. And as I spoke, I felt some part of myself growing lighter, like a knot in my chest might finally unravel. Stephen's answer came with a certainty I hadn't heard from anyone in years. I understand, Mrs. Taylor. I'll get to work right away. First, let me confirm exactly what's left in your name. Do you have those documents with you? Yes, I have all the bank books and papers here. I'll keep them ready. That night, as the moon traced silver through the cracks in my window, hope, a thin and stubborn thing, began to slip back into my heart. For the first time in ages, I believed there might be more to my story than simply vanishing into someone else's plans. Yes, everything important I've kept safe in my little suitcase, all of it. It'll be all right, Margaret. We're going to get back what you've built, what you deserve. Hearing Stephen's calm promise, I couldn't stop the tears from coming anymore. I tried, but they spilled over hot, silent, unstoppable. That afternoon, Stephen called again. His voice cut through the quiet shed like the first break of spring after a brutal winter. He had news. It didn't take long after starting his investigation for something truly astonishing to surface. I discovered a bank account, opened in your name about 28 years ago. Back in the years when John and I still ran the tailor shop together, my husband had quietly opened a savings account in my name. He'd set aside money faithfully, never breathing a word to me about it. Mrs. Taylor, that account, the current balance is $2,800,000. $2 million? I nearly dropped the phone. My words tangled and disappeared, trapped by sheer disbelief. There's 28 years' worth of compounded interest, plus a handful of certificates of deposit your husband added along the way. That's how it grew to this amount. Margaret, this is indisputably your money, your rightful asset. My hands trembled so hard I had to sink into the chair to steady myself. All at once, I could feel the full weight of John's love. Everything he'd ever wanted to say, all his silent devotion, was pressed between those faded pages of the bank book. I realized then, clear as a sunrise through all the loneliness, through all the ways I'd been cast aside, I was not, and never had been, truly alone. How could I have let myself believe that no one needed me anymore? I scolded myself, whispering the words inside my heart. Stephen didn't stop there. He thoughtfully connected me with a reputable investigators group he often relied on for delicate family cases. They worked with quiet, dogged purpose, piecing together every thread. They traced timelines. They parsed out the way my son Daniel had taken my notary stamp, forged my signature, filed the title transfer paperwork behind my back. They combed through the records, property transactions, asset flows, phone logs with the real estate agent. They left nothing unseen. I couldn't do any of this alone. But deep down, I knew that uncovering the truth, nothing more, nothing less, was the last piece of dignity I could claim, both as a mother and as myself. That night, I settled against the thin prefab wall of the shed and pulled out a single-lined sheet of paper. Dear Daniel, if you've ever thought your mother was useless, let me show you just what this useless person has protected and carried all these years. I do not hate you, my son. But I may never be able to forgive you either. My handwriting ran and wobbled, the ink smudged by hands that would barely hold steady. Yet I didn't bother to start again. I simply breathed and, setting down the pen, let out a wordless prayer. This might be my last fight after all. Night settled softly on the shed. Outside, the wind hummed low, rattling the old wall so gently it felt more like a lullaby than a warning. I closed my eyes and let memory take me back to the days John and I made do. With little yet had everything that counted. He was the most honest man I've ever known. Steady, humble, and true. I'd spent a lifetime proud of the man whose strong back I'd leaned on. That's why, now, I had to stand up, if not as a mother or someone's wife, then simply as myself. I gathered my breath, quiet but determined, feeling resolve settle in my bones. My life wasn't over, not yet. If I was going to reclaim what mattered, I'd have to begin again, one step at a time. May 10th, 2024, New York, 8th Outer A.M. The sky was so sharply blue you'd think it had never known trouble. The sunlight spilled over the grassy lawns and townhomes as if nothing in the world could go wrong. But for me, on that day, everything was about to change. The curtain was about to rise on the most important act of my whole life. The previous evening, I finally let myself go to the beauty parlor a few blocks from my apartment. Just a trim, but I had them brush out my graying hair and style it soft and neat. The navy dress I chose was old, but I'd cared for it well-pressed and lint-free. A simple string of pearls that John had given me on my 50th birthday completed the outfit. When I looked at my reflection in their big round mirror, I whispered under my breath, "This is who I am." All those invisible years, no one noticed, no one asked for me. I lived like a shadow. But today was different. Today, I would stand for myself. 8 o'clock sharp. A black Rolls-Royce Phantom glided to a stop in front of the little apartment complex. So quietly, folks on the block stared. The driver stepped out, opened the rear door, and bowed his head, just a bit, with solemn respect. "Mrs. Margaret Taylor, I'm here to take you to the house in Westchester. Shall we?" His voice carried, turning heads up and down the street. Neighbors blinked, peered through curtains, phones in hand. Instead of flinching, I straightened my back, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. Our destination, the house I'd been evicted from. That big, white, two-story on Glenwood Lane, now home to Daniel and Allison. The car glided away, and within minutes, we were parked at the curb in front of the very place I'd watched slip from my hands. I stepped onto the lawn. Immediately, neighborhood women gathering for their morning walks stopped and stared, their curiosity plain as day. A few started filming on their phones. Who was this old woman with the limousine? Service? Wait, is that Mrs. Taylor? Margaret Taylor? In a Rolls-Royce? I did not hurry. I walked up the drive, through the open gate, and stood steady as anyone ever could. That was when Allison rushed out from the house, messy hair, panic written on her face. Once, she'd told Daniel that I was only good for a checkbook. Now, seeing the heavy envelope in my hands, she understood something big was happening. She called out, voice shrill with fear. "What is that? Hand it over. You're not dragging us down again with your little scams. Just give me the money." She tore the envelope out of my grip with more force than I expected. But inside, Allison found only a single bank transfer slip and a thick sheaf of official papers. She thumbed through them, her face turning pale as the clouds. Her voice quivered. $500,000? She staggered, nearly dropping the documents. The top page was clearly labeled, "Donation Statement." Recipient, New York Center for Childhood Cancer, amount, $500. 00 donor, Margaret Taylor. Behind her, Daniel appeared, breathless, catching the tail end of Allison's discovery. He took in the number and went stone silent. In a calm, even voice, I spoke, making sure each word rang clear. How I spend my money isn't for anybody else to decide. Most especially not for folks who saw fit to lock their mother in a shed. That's not for you to question. This is money I built over 40 years. You haven't any idea what kind of work it took, what I sacrificed that you can't, begin to imagine. I came here today to show you. I noticed the blinking red lights from the phones people were recording. News vans would pull up soon, word would spread. Once in my life, I was not afraid to claim my place. Let the world see me. Let them remember who I really was. When people get old, I went on, they become invisible. You become see-through. Not heard, not seen, expected to disappear with dignity and silence. But I've chosen not to vanish. I'll stand right here. I will never forget the day you called me useless. Never. But from today on, my value is mine to decide. I fell silent, letting the words soak the air. The yard hummed with whispers, the press jostling for photos. Somebody murmured from the crowd. Taylor. Wasn't she the one who used to run that tailor shop on Main? The one the local paper wrote about? Didn't she win some community award back then? Old memories were rising fragments of the person I'd been before the world forgot. Daniel just stood there, mouth open, too stunned to argue. No longer the confident man who'd ordered me around, but a child lost at sea. I was no longer his shadow, his convenience. I was myself. Slowly, I turned to face the house. I didn't come today for revenge, I said, steady as the oak that shaded our old porch. I came here for one thing only, to take myself back. To be Margaret Taylor again. Gently, I stooped, picked up the fallen paperwork, and slid it back into the envelope, tucking it close to my heart, like everything else I'd saved. And then, I said these words, never again. Never again will I let my life be placed under someone else's control. That was the last thing I said before I slid back into the rear seat of the Rolls-Royce and pulled the door closed, quietly, with the soft, sure finality of someone making a choice only she can make. The engine hummed to life. The car began to roll forward, slow and measured, down the drive. Through the window, I watched as my son Daniel and his wife Allison stood together at the gate, speechless, planted as if their feet were rooted in concrete. In the distance, their shapes shrank, becoming smaller and smaller as the car followed the winding road away from the house that had once been our home. Eyes fixed on the passing city, I murmured softly, half to myself, but loud enough that the air itself seemed to take note. With these hands, these very hands so many once wrote off as helpless, I'm choosing my future again. That, for me, as a mother, that's my honest, humble pride. Beside me, gentle strains of classical piano music drifted over the leather seats, looping in the air, a soft, almost invisible comfort. I let myself lean into that piece, eyes closing, a faint smile tugging across my face. At last, at long, blessed last, I thought, the day has come when I can finally live boldly, without apology, as the person I am. We turned a corner. I reached up and drew the curtain across the back window, shielding myself from the world for a moment. A simple barrier, a fresh boundary. Still, just before I let it fall, I glanced back one more time. Daniel and Allison remained there at the entrance, frozen and unmoving. They didn't chase after the car. They didn't wave. They just watched us go. It was as if time itself had stopped. Two lost figures paused at the threshold, surrounded by the faintest haze of sadness and something that edged close to regret. Daniel, I thought, what are you feeling right now, I wonder? Inside me, there was no more anger. Not really, not vengeance. Only one pure, stubborn emotion remained. Did my son even for an instant feel regret? If so, even if just for a heartbeat, then this whole difficult journey, the resolve it's taken, every step today has been worth it. That answer, however, would have to come from Daniel himself. Only he could find it. And besides, our story isn't finished yet. I set my eyes forward. On the little table by my knee, my black leather case waited, neatly latched. I unlocked it, the click echoing in the quiet space, and lifted the lid. Inside were several important documents, all precise and orderly. A few sheets of legal forms, a dog-eared notepad, and near the front, a draft of my will, the ink still fresh from only days before. It wasn't official yet, but it had all the force and clarity of my final wishes. I scanned the lines I'd written, simple and determined. An excerpt from my will. Excerpt from Will, Margaret Taylor. All financial assets shall be donated to the Elder Support Foundation of Westchester. My property in the Brooklyn area shall be repurposed as an emergency shelter for women and children facing abuse or homelessness. All of my personal belongings, clothes, photographs, diaries are to be disposed of in accordance with my own wishes, including by cremation if I so specify. No part of my estate is to be bequeathed to my son Daniel or his spouse, Allison. D.K. However, the letter on the final page, my mother's prayer, shall be preserved as my sole lifelong legacy. This, mother's prayer, was accompanied by a faded notebook. I had kept it since I was a teenager, scribbling worries, dreams, little moments. It held, page after page, the daily mess of living, Daniel's milestones, Christmas memories, arguments, laughter, grief, pride, and yes, most honestly and quietly, my loneliness too. Written in a way words barely captured, written for no one but myself. One of my favorite pages read, "To be a mother, perhaps, is mostly to give and to wait, and, in the very end, to have the courage to let go after all." I closed the notebook gently, resting it in my lap as the city outside unfurled row after row of glass towers, traffic rivers twisting below, the Brooklyn skyline graying in the window light. Once, I'd longed to live in this city. Now, it was just background, a setting to a story I'd finally begun to write for myself. "Mrs. Taylor will be arriving in just a few minutes." The driver's words were gentle, almost deferential. I met his gaze in the rearview mirror and nodded. "Thank you," I said. Just that. It had taken me so many days to reach this point, days of shaking, with uncertainty, heart pounding in my chest, wrestling with the sick doubt of it all. Was this right? Would any of it touch Daniel, reach him in a way that mattered? But now, sitting here, I finally knew. Whether any of this matters isn't for anyone else to decide. It's a mark I make with my own hands, a testament that I was here, that I lived, that I chose, with eyes open. We slowed, turned, and rolled to a stop before a large old home, colonial style, brick and slate, tucked deep under towering oaks. Once, John and I had paced these steps, dreaming of living here together one day. Now my own name was on the deed. It was ready to be reborn, not as private estate, but as a new neighborhood center, a welcoming place for the lonely, the elderly, the marooned. "Welcome home, Mrs. Taylor." A staff member, her hair shot with gray, her eyes warm as bread, bowed her head in greeting on the steps. I returned her bow with a gentle tilt of my own, gripping my case. And then, I stepped forward toward a new chapter, toward a life where the end could become a gift, to turn the last of my days into something I'd be proud to leave behind. And so, at last, the unseen mother, the one nobody ever noticed, could show her true, unshakable worth. My story, I realized, still has a little more to tell. We reached the city avenue, the car making its way through late afternoon traffic. The sun hit a red light. We stopped. Suddenly a voice called out, "Mom! Mom! Wait!" Thin, desperate, half strangled, Daniel's voice. My son, the child I'd risked everything for. I looked out in time to see him running wild down the sidewalk, tie flapping, suit jacket trailing, his hair a mess. No business calm now, just a son chasing after his mother with all the stubborn panic of a little boy. "Stop the car, please." My voice barely broke the calm, but the driver understood. He eased us to the curb, hit the hazard lights. The door swung open, and in the rush of city air, Daniel dropped to his knees right there on the pavement. He braced himself with both hands. His eyes, rimmed red, overflowed. For a few seconds he couldn't speak, his chest jerking, sobs barely contained. Mom, I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I was wrong about everything. All of it. I got it all wrong. I watched him silent, my heart in my throat. It was like seeing the ghost of my little boy, Daniel at 9, knees scraped from running too fast at field day, running to me in tears, desperate not to be left alone. Mom, please, please let me try again. I know it's late. I know I don't deserve it. But I finally understand how you must have felt. Please. I nodded. Small, quiet, emotion so slight it was almost invisible. Opening the case on my knees, I slid out one last envelope, the gravest one I owned. Last Will and Testament, Margaret Taylor. Passing it into his trembling hands, I chose my next words as carefully as I could. Daniel, ever since the day you saw me only as useless, I decided I would be the one who measured my worth. Daniel's hands shook so badly the pages crackled as he unfolded them. Inside was the official will, a detailed account of my estate, and, sitting on top, a tiny handwritten note. What is this? My entire estate, every penny, has already been entrusted to the Elder Support Foundation and to causes. Helping those nobody else will help. But all of it? Everything? Nothing left for? That's right. Not a penny for you or Allison. In that moment, Daniel's face sagged. He stifled a cry, slumped down to the rest of the world. He might have seemed broken. But to me he looked only like a boy who'd lost something he never understood he had. Still, there was one more thing I had to put into his hands. At the very bottom of the case, beneath all the legal papers, I'd stowed a small cloth bundle, frayed gingham, faded as sunlight. I unwrapped it slowly. Inside was an old, hand-knitted sweater, yellowed now with the years, a little unraveled at one sleeve. Daniel's breath caught, his hands pressed to his mouth. He choked on tears. "Do you remember this?" I asked, almost whispering. "This is the sweater I made for you when you were 10. Remember how you wore it every single day to school, that winter?" He nodded, fighting not to sob. The weight of memory was heavy in that block of city noise. The traffic, the horns, none of it could touch what was happening inside that quiet space of our own. Mom, I'm sorry. I forgot. I forgot something that precious. I wrapped the little sweater between both. His hands, folding his fingers down around it. It was all the forgiveness I could manage, silent, final, but enough. And then, in all that city noise, I rested my palm against his trembling shoulder. He said nothing more. There were no magic words that could fix the years behind us. Nothing that could finally bridge the gap. In that moment, there was only warmth. Old, simple, impossibly stubborn love, mended together like a patch over a life's long, missing seam. At last, I stood, smoothing my dress. I pressed my lips to Daniel's forehead, as I'd done when he was little, and said only this: "Take care. That's what matters now." The car inched into the traffic again, rolling toward the future. I looked forward, chin high. What I'd lost, and what I'd rebuilt, the things said and all the things only felt, all of it was mine, as true as any thread I'd ever sewn. Sometimes, a life is measured not by all you acquired, but by what and how you chose to give, and by the love that, even when slighted, never wholly disappears. That's the story I leave behind. That's the gift. My mother could never bring herself to give up this sweater. No matter how many times she had to move, no matter how rough things got, she kept it. This was all she had left. I won't ask any more what kind of place your mother held in your heart. There's nothing left to question. But if you ever remember even a scrap of your mother's love, just once, somewhere along the road, believe me, that will be enough. A thick silence lingered on the street. Through those long moments, Daniel choked out, "I'm sorry," over and over, words stumbling from his lips like a child abandoned outside a locked door. His voice was shaky, smaller than I'd ever heard, and yet there was a familiar, lost sweetness there too. Before I returned to the car, I asked him just once, gently, from a place he'd always known was home. "Daniel, what will you choose from here on out?" He sat there, on the curb, pressing the faded sweater close to his chest. Amid his tears, he nodded. Just barely, just enough that I saw him. And that, and only that, became, for me, the truest sign of hope I have ever known. An answer stronger than any words. The driver stepped out and opened the passenger door with care and old-fashioned courtesy. I eased back onto the seat, the plush leather cold beneath my fingers. From the side mirror, I caught one last glimpse of Daniel, just a small, hunched figure under the streetlight, sweater clutched hard against his chest, searching the bright blue sky for something he couldn't name. That everlasting, aching distance between mother and child. One, I thought, could never be crossed. Seemed, in that moment, to gently start unraveling at last. Inside the car, I laid my hands neatly over my knees and sat quietly for a while, hopping, unable to move. The whole exchange had the blurred softness of a dream. My chest, empty, peaceful, stunned. Beyond the window, the early June wind rustled new leaves across the avenue, and the far-off laughter of schoolchildren, kids in bright t-shirts hefting. Overloaded backpacks floated up from the sidewalk. Somewhere in that scatter, I could almost hear the small, eager footsteps of my son. Years ago, leaving for school. "Bye, Mom. See you tonight," he'd call out, waving, bright as spring. I'd watch his little backpack bounce away. I never imagined then the day would come when that distance would grow so painfully, impossibly wide between us. From my purse, I reached for a small envelope. It was a letter I'd written days ago, standing in front of John's old photo, just me and the silence. Inside, a few short, wobbly lines, my handwriting blurring with age. To raise a child is to let go of their hand, but never let go of your heart. Love is something that finds its way, even through silence. Reading those words, I felt a steady, quiet warmth blossom inside me. There was no urge to cry, no anger left. Only this gentle quiet, which felt, finally, like the way a mother's story ought to close. Right then, the intercom buzzed inside the car. "Mrs. Taylor, there's a gentleman calling out to you at the rear of the vehicle. Do you wish to stop?" I waited, then shook my head. No, that's all right. It's time now for him to walk his own path. I kept my hands folded in my lap. My arm would not stretch out again. Not now. But my heart, I knew, was still warm. This was not turning away out of coldness, but out of trust. When a person finally faces their failures, true atonement doesn't come by searching for someone else's forgiveness. It comes by standing up straight, walking forward, one step at a time, at their own pace. There's no shortcut, no gentle hand to lead you, only the stumbling courage to begin again. All I can wish for now is that Daniel finds the will to do just that. One last document sat in my attaché case. I hadn't shown it to anyone yet. A letter from the director of the charity I'd chosen. "Because of your generous gift, Mrs. Taylor, construction has begun on a new residence for elderly support in the city. The center will bear, for now, the working name, Margaret's House." It struck me as a little embarrassing to have my own name on a building, and yet, if it offers shelter to even one lost soul, maybe, just maybe, my name will serve some good after all. That's where I was headed now, the empty lot on the city's quiet side, where old bricks would be made new. We would make a final, gentle home, reclaim a worn-down house and shape it into a safe place for the old and tired. There'd be a little patch of garden for vegetables, a porch where neighbors could stop for iced tea after lunch. Someone would welcome you. "It's good to see you," they'd say. Another would answer, "Thanks for being here." Just an ordinary miracle. The kindness and conversations I couldn't manage for my own child. I wanted, at least, to offer to strangers. Because if I truly failed as a mother, then to become a little bit everybody's mother, to patch together warmth out of what's left that might give a last gentle meaning to my ordinary life. I pressed my hand to my heart and whispered to the quiet, "Daniel, if you ever find it in you to care for someone again, then all the days of my life will have been worth it after all." The car rolled forward, slow, through the city. We slipped beyond the rush and noise, down winding hills and sleepy, streets until there, waiting within the hush, was a home no one yet knew was mine. 1 month passed. Early summer yielded to the hush of steady rain. The city settled under a veil of cloud, the roof whispered with quiet showers. Now, I spend my days in the kitchen of a small diner, just beside that old white house on Glenwood Lane, the same house where Daniel and Allison had once told me, plainly, "Please don't stay here, Mom." I built my new life just next door, among the steam of fresh-cooked rice, in hours brightened by the promise of something warm to offer. The little sign outside reads, simply, "Margaret's Table." Underneath, in gentle script, "Everyone welcome, a warm meal awaits inside." This place is for those with nowhere to go, older folks alone, people down on their luck, anyone needing a kind word or just a place to sit out the rain. 30 plates a day, no more. Each one hand-carried, each dish a small promise to the neighborhood. The kitchen is simple. The food, just what I know best. Roasts, stews, biscuits, and always a great pot of soup. When I set down my tailor's needle, it was here, standing by a stove for someone else's supper, that I found my hands still had purpose. A little radio sits by the spice rack, playing soft swing and doo-wop, songs from a gentler, older world. My knife keeps time on the worn wooden board, and outside, I hear the cheerful shouts and laughter of regulars lining up behind the rain-speckled glass. "What's on the menu today, Margaret?" "Yesterday's meatloaf, best I've had." Reminds me of my mom's. "This soup, it's just like home." Every word lights a little spark in me. It never gets old. Not every day these past weeks has been easy. Just days after all that happened, I heard, by way of a neighbor, that Daniel lost his job, that his marriage with Allison was over. Folks caught wind he'd forged my name and tried to take what wasn't his. The news spread like cold water. His reputation, his friendships, gone in a single night. Some would call it justice. I can't bring myself to think of it that way. Maybe this is Daniel's first meeting with real solitude. Maybe, inside the ache, he'll learn how to keep someone else's hand steady. If he does, just once, that's enough for any mother. Most evenings now, right as dusk settles in and the last customers drift home, I notice the same lone figure under an umbrella, standing across the lane, just out of reach of the old house. He never comes inside. Some nights, he watches through the misty windows. Some nights, I catch him glancing at my hands as I serve someone a bowl of soup. Once, I thought I saw him bow his head, the tiniest nod, so quick it might have been my imagination. But I know it's Daniel. I know it's my son. And quietly, I think, I understand why he can't bring himself to walk in. My life has gently circled back to a kind of beginning, a place where the tired and the left behind can gather for warmth and small comfort. Some memories are too sharp to step through. Some bridges need more than words. But every plate I set out, every seat I keep ready, I do with the hope that kindness can reach where explanations can't. And for all the miles that open and close between a mother and her grown child, sometimes, simple presence is the greatest gift left to give. So when the rain quietly taps on the window and the radio hums with songs that remember the edges of home, I find peace in this small work, sharing what I have, cooking with both memory and hope. If Daniel ever steps through that door, he'll find a place at my table. But whether he does or doesn't, I'll go on serving in this quiet way, offering what warmth I can, not as a sacrifice, but as a plain, unadorned act of love. That's all a mother can do. That's all I ever wanted to do. And now, at last, I know it is more than enough. That's surely. The confusion inside me, the quiet pain of not being able to say, "Mom, may I have dinner?" The hesitation, the way I fumble all over myself, not knowing how to bridge decades worth of thank yous left unsaid. Now, after all this time, I don't know what to make of the weight of those lost words, or of my son's awkwardness in the quiet spaces left between us. And yet, even still, I find myself thinking this. Just to watch him, that's enough. To see my son moving on his own 2 feet, struggling in his own heart, and yet still, despite everything, choosing to stop by and look in on his. Mother's living, breathing figure. That alone, to me, is a tiny, trembling hope. His way of reaching out, wordless, hoping deep down for some thread of connection. The barest prayer. Can we be close again after all this time? Because of this, I always set out one more bowl than needed on the table beside the diner's window. The very spot Daniel passes by each evening. One extra plate. I never serve it to anyone else. I never say whose it is. Just this, a quiet bowl of rice waiting. And someday, I truly believe, Daniel will find the courage to sit down in that chair once again. That's why I always leave the chair empty. I say nothing, I simply wait. The other day, something small happened. It was raining. As usual, Daniel stood under the eaves across the lane. This time, before leaving, he gently slipped something into the diner's mailbox. After the last customer went home and the shop was shuttered for the night, I checked. There, lying softly inside, was a single sheet of lined paper. Written in his hand, the message read, "Dear Mom." Just the smell of dinner was enough to bring me to tears. Back then, the warmth of our everyday meals, I only now finally see how precious it all was. In one corner, the paper was smudged and wet. I couldn't tell whether it was from the rain or from someone's tears. I took the letter, careful not to crease it, and wiped it softly dry. Then, I tucked it away in an envelope and buried it deep in the back of my desk drawer at home. No, I didn't write a reply. But in its place, I made a quiet promise that tomorrow, just like today, just like always, I'll set out that bowl of plain, white rice in front of the empty chair once more. You see, family isn't just the words we speak to each other. Sometimes the smallest things, a bite of food, the steam rising from the pot, the scent of homemade soup. Those are what gently untangle a knotted heart. My name is Margaret Taylor. Once, I stitched and hemmed for my neighborhood, a humble tailor. Now I stand at the stove, a nameless cook. And you know, both lives were really the same. Both are callings meant to wrap someone else in safety and warmth. Whether that someone is my own son, a stranger, or anyone in between, I keep making hot food every single day. I keep the seat open. I keep the table ready. I believe, truly, that this is the last and truest shape my love as a mother will ever take. In my little diner, nailed above the stove, I keep a framed card, hand-lettered in old black ink. It was the first thing I hung up when I opened for business. It's the first thing I bow my head to every morning. Love is not a transaction. That's what my husband John used to say. Over and over, like a motto you could count on. To love someone isn't about making trades. It's not handing over something to get something back. It's simply treasuring the fact that person is there, right beside you, alive with you in this world. He was never much good with words or grand displays. But he was honest, always, always honest. Never once did he boast or count up what he'd done for our family. He just quietly kept us safe, even on his hardest days. In his shadow, I tried my best to do the same. Not perfect, never flashy, just steady in the way I lived for the sake of another. That sign. I drew those words by hand, brushing each letter slow and careful. It had been decades since I held a proper paintbrush, so my fingers shook. As I worked, the doubts filled my mind. Did my love bind someone up instead of freeing them? Did I ever just give, without hoping something would come back? Still, when the sign was done, I felt the weight on my shoulders slip a little. It wasn't a message for anyone else. It was a reminder to myself, first and foremost. These days, my diner sees new faces every morning. Older couples walking up from the senior apartments. Folks with walkers or wheelchairs. Young people, some with nowhere to go. All of them carrying their own worries, their own sorrows, sometimes their private loneliness. They come in, take a seat, and settle in the circle of gentle steam and neighborly hello. One afternoon, a young woman paused as she stood up to leave and said to me, quietly, "When I come here, I feel like somebody actually sees me." She smiled, eyes glistening. I was so moved, I found myself unable to answer for a moment, my heart warm and trembling at the same time. to be seen. That's the heart of things, isn't it? We all need someone to really look, to care, to recognize we're there. It's simple. It's everything that keeps us, in the end, from disappearing. You see, when being watched turns into being acknowledged, even for a second, a person finds the strength to stand up and try again. It made me start to wonder. When was the last time we looked our parents in the face and truly saw them? When was the last time we spoke the simple words, "thank you," and meant it? Chasing busy days, running town to town. I let myself believe my folks would be there always, rooted, permanent. But years pass. Our parents age. Glasses get thicker, steps get slower, everyone's doctor appointments fill the wall calendar. Do we really see how time passes for them, one little stamp at a time? Lately, a customer started coming by. A young man, always bringing his elderly father. The son never says much, except, "Dad doesn't talk much. But he loves how you make the soup here." Each time I hear that, my mind slips back to Daniel. If my boy just once, for any reason at all, ever said, "Mom, I'd like to eat with you again," I know I'd stand at the stove even if my hands were shaking, even if my body was all worn out. I'd cook that meal if I had to drag myself there step by step. And what I'd want to pass across the table wouldn't just be food. It would be the plain, shining truth. I am grateful for you, for just being here. So now I want to ask. Have you seen your parents' health cards? The ones covered in quiet hospital visits? Do you know how many appointment reminders are tucked away in their wallets? Maybe sometime I'll visit. Maybe soon I'll find the time. But days roll by. The old rooms get colder. In the back of the freezer sits the ice cream or chicken pie they kept. Waiting, your favorite, untouched, growing older along with them. Right now, you still have time. Pick up the phone, write a letter, or just sit down and share a meal. It doesn't take much to change the something inside you that's been knotted for too long. My name is Margaret Taylor. I am a mother who never once heard thank you from her only son before the world took her chance away. And it's exactly because of that I want to sit quietly on this side, lifting up whoever comes, giving back to the future stories still waiting to heal. For those listening to my story now, may I ask just one thing? Tonight, before you sleep, pause for a moment. Picture your parents' smile. Remember their voice, when you could still lean into it, safe and unashamed. Then gently ask yourself, what did I ever truly do for them? What words did I manage to share while they were still here? If the answer feels unfinished, don't wait. Make that call while today's light is still warm. Time, after all, waits for no one. Your someday could so easily become someone else's too late. So here, right at this moment, treasure what you have. And maybe, just maybe, tell me your own story if you feel brave enough. That small new beginning you offer might ease another's tears, or reach someone else who felt untouched. Family isn't meant for stepping in only when the need is urgent. It's an everyday thing, a living, breathing tie, day by quiet day. I'm learning, in these last years, to be at peace with my time coming to an end. But truthfully, I feel no regret. For giving up everything, I found something beyond possession, the gift of genuine peace. That's what remains. That's the story I want to share. And that, more than anything, is the shape my love has finally taken. You too surely have feelings you hope to share. Whatever those feelings may be, please hold them close. Please don't let your voice go unheard. Find a way to pass those words along to someone who needs to hear them. Love is not a transaction. But love does call for the courage to say what's in your heart and let it be known. Sometimes, it's easier to keep our truest thoughts tucked away inside, to assume that those we love somehow already understand. Yet life passes quickly, and unspoken kindness can melt away with it. So, in this moment, if there's something you wish you could say, don't let worry or pride hold you back. Give those words, let them be heard, even if it takes more bravery than you think you have. Love isn't about keeping score or waiting for something in return. It's not about bargaining, trade-offs, or debts. Love is a gift you choose to offer, a light you hold out in the dark. And when you do find the courage to speak from your heart, that single act might just mend a broken bond or comfort a spirit, whether it's your own or someone else's. Remember this: the chance to share your feelings may not come again. Cherish what you have to say. Trust that your voice matters, and let it reach the people who matter most. That is the simple, steadfast courage that love asks of us all.